Okay, I am going to call the meeting to order, and we will begin with a roll call, and I'm going to have you just go around and say your name nice and loudly, so that we have everybody recorded here. So I'm going to start over there, Amy.
Amy Doran here. Don Kirk here. Pam Howard here.
Alexandra Lessem here.
Nancy Rumfeld here.
Barbara Cruz here.
And Stu Boyd, present.
Oh,
Just okay, one of us.
yeah. Just
All
your
right.
English teacher.
And we don't need to say the, yeah, we do say the pledge. We have this. Okay, so Stu, will you lead us in the pledge?
Since I'm present, I will do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Awesome, thank you. All right, our next little item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda for tonight's meeting? Hearing none, I will take a motion to adopt the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So that was from Stu?
I think we did it in chorus, so
Okay.
whichever one.
Approved, okay, company, approved. So we need to do a roll call of that. So let me think, it's Stu Boyd,
Aye.
Amy Doran,
Aye.
Don Kirk,
Aye.
okay.
Pam
Barb
Howard.
Cruz, aye.
Oh, you're next. Pam Howard, aye.
Thank you. Alexandra?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Okay, I don't have that quite memorized, do I? All right, so we have discussion items that are presented that were on our agenda that we will be working with. We will listen to the presentations first, and then we'll have opportunity for questions. But we'll let you guys go through the whole thing first.
So,
Yes,
Madam President, so I just want to make sure, so the only thing that will be on consent agenda for the March 16th meeting will be. I'm sorry, August 16th, I got the number, I was so focused on like doing the math that I got the month wrong. Okay. August 16th, we have personnel as well as any contracts over $50,000. So I just want to make sure if there are any questions on those two items before we go into.
and there were a lot of items over the 50,000, but that's just because of summer and getting these going, is that correct?
That is correct. It's the
Okay.
beginning of the year.
So are we, is it time to ask a question or what are we,
No?
or is he gonna present?
No, it's just consent items, so was there one that you had questions?
All I really wanted to say was on the 50,000 contract is I really love all the detail. You put the name, like what's it for, the fund. It makes it so easy to look at that now and know, like what are we spending the money on. So I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we have CASB updates. Stu, is there anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a
I
brief
forgot we had
report.
an agenda.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
So are we going to be out here at like what, 6:30?
I'm hoping 6:15.
All right, Stu.
All right, I do have a brief CASB legislative report. It isn't dealing with legislation that has been enacted. It's with something that I hope will be pending sometime soon, and I'll explain what I mean that will be pending. Let me give you a little bit of background. When I met with Dr. Schaefer for our first one-on-one in December of 2019, one of the questions that I asked him was, when are we going to talk about the hot schools? And as I've shared with the board before, I spent 25 years teaching on the second floor of a building, and the south wall was all windows, and I know what it's like to teach in a really hot room. So fast forward a couple years to a board meeting that we had in spring of 2022 when we talked about ventilation again. And I asked if the team, if Todd and Kristen and the team could come up with some heat mitigation strategies for buildings and rooms that were not air conditioned, and they did that, and that information was disseminated to the principals. So, fast forward to now. About 3 weeks ago, I met with Senator Marchman. Let me tell the rest of you that I made it very clear when I was meeting with her that I was meeting with her and asking questions as an individual board member, that I was not asking anything or proposing anything as a member of the board, as a spokesman for the board. I actually invited her to be with us tonight, and she may come. I hope if she does come, she is able to come while the ventilation presentation is still going on. What I wanted to talk to her about was possible legislation at the state level dealing with air conditioning. She was very friendly to the conversation. I think probably because she told me that for several years she taught on the 3rd floor at Bill Reed. And is there a hotter place in the Thompson School District when it's hot outside than the 3rd floor of Bill Reed? So she was very friendly to what I wanted to talk with her about. The reason I wanted to talk with her is we're financially strapped when it comes to air conditioning. We have many aging buildings that have a variety of needs, whether it's roofs or whatever it happens to be. And it occurred to me, as it probably has to most of you, that at the rate we're going, we're never going to be able to retrofit schools in our school district when we can only allocate a few $1 million at a time. And for the benefit of the members of the public who are here, that sounds like a lot of money, a few $1 million every year. But when you realize that in order to retrofit our buildings, we're looking at $100 million that it would take. So I asked her if she would support or draft a bill to provide districts like ours with money, perhaps through one-on-one matching, two-for-one matching, where, for example, the state would furnish $2 for every $1 that we would be able to contribute, so that within a few years, we would actually be able to retrofit our buildings with air conditioning. She said that, to her knowledge, a bill like this had not been introduced. She said that she was very interested in learning more about it. She had some thoughts about it. I shared some more things that I thought about it, and I won't go into those. But because of my work on the Legislative Relations Committee at CASB, I knew that not every bill that gets passed by the state legislature necessarily benefits every school district in the state. Last year, one bill in particular, I think it was a $40 million bill, benefited only those districts that were considered rural. And so I knew that it was possible for the legislature to target a group. And so what I asked her to do was to explore the possibility of drafting legislation, not just on our behalf, but on behalf of other districts that need to retrofit their schools with air conditioning and can't afford to do it. If you kind of looked ahead at our presentation tonight, we're going to see several school districts in our area, many of which are fully air conditioned, but they aren't all. And around the state of Colorado, I did a little research. There are a lot of districts that, and not just small districts, that have either individual buildings or lots of buildings in the district that aren't. So I'm very encouraged by her reaction. I believe that if this bill gets introduced, that there would be widespread support for it. I told her I would be happy to testify on behalf of the bill, and I said I suspect several of my board members and members of administration would be willing to do that as well. We need to get our buildings air conditioned, and I'm just concerned that at the rate that we can afford to do it, it will never happen. So that's my report, Barb. It's not existing legislation. It's legislation that I hope in a short period of time I'll be able to tell you is pending legislation. So,
Can I give a quick update too? So the Federal Relations Network is hosting a tour. The focus is on the CTE, at the state. And so we actually have 2 stops on the tour. So we're gonna showcase Thompson Career Campus and Walt Clark. And the idea that we get to share that great success of having so much programs that are going between middle school and high school is really amazing. So that is on August 29th. You're all gonna get the invite for lunch because we're hosting the lunch. And so if you can make it to join us for any part of the tour and for lunch, great. I think as of yesterday, we have 12 legislators or their staffers. It's state level and federal level, as well as CASB staff and things like that. So it'll be a good chance for us to showcase what we're doing.
29th, right?
Where will it be done?
It's actually we start in Denver, we're coming here, and then we go to Greeley. So it's a whole day for those of us who are on the tour. But it's gonna be maybe 3 hours, I think, total in Thompson in the middle of the
Okay.
day that day.
So we can just pick out the Thompson if we wanted to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you do
That's a
not
good
want to
idea.
do the whole bus tour.
Right.
I mean,
There's
I
only-
do, but we don't.
My understanding is there's only 3 school districts being featured on
Correct.
this legislative
Wow.
tour, so it's Greeley, us, and Adams.
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
So
pretty
that's
cool.
awesome. So we
Yeah.
can showcase.
That's amazing.
And they want to talk about specifically CTE, so
Right.
it wasn't just me saying, oh, we have some good stuff. They knew that we had good stuff, and that was just a really great way that came together. And we also have the whole day together to talk about what funding might look like, what could it look like to have support for what's next for us too. So it'll be exciting.
Wow, I think we're really lucky to have Stu and Don on these committees. You guys are rocking it. So thanks for all your work and connections and making sure Thompson is well represented. That hasn't always been the case in the past, so you guys are really important.
We just have to say what's going on, and then, you know, the
People are
work
like, wow.
speaks for itself. We just have to hold up the microphone. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we can go to our study session with our company. So we're going to start with the ventilation system upgrade options, and it's a continuation of what we talked about in May? No, June? I believe.
June. Seems like yesterday, but.
Doesn't it go? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Madam President, Board of Education, Dr. Schaefer, Top County Chief Operations Officer, and with me tonight, I also have,
Kristen Batiki, Director of Operations.
and you'll notice a little different than we talked in June, the title of the presentation changed. As we did some reflection over the summer, you know, air mitigation, cooling mitigation is a piece in a system of a building. But there's more than just that. You know, there's the heating, there's the air quality. So as we talk more about, you know, how we funded the funding structures, what it looks like, cooling is a piece of it, but we also have aging systems throughout our buildings that this will also mitigate. So a little spin on, you know, the air cooling, that is a benefit of this, but then the other benefit is also just the improvement of the ventilation throughout the buildings. And to do this in connection with Strive 2025 is 1.2 and 4.2. So the prioritization really of our capital needs in human resource, that's really a connection that strives right into student achievement. So, an overview, so as you may have seen in the past, just like a few months ago, we are going to go over again some historical data, what we've done in the past, some successes over the summer. So we heard about Bill Reed in the 3rd floor being the hottest. I was up there today, it's now one of the coolest. So that's super exciting. But then really want to dive into funding options and how we tackle this issue in front of us. So this is not something that, you know, as Stu mentioned, we are doing, you know, all alone. There's districts across the state that either have completed or in the process of completing different upgrades. So the purpose of then the funding options and scenarios is to talk about how do we actually tackle it. What is the scenario we want to take, the board wants to take forward that could possibly get us to our end goal.
All right, so Stu already kind of mentioned this slide. As we look across the state, a number of other larger school districts like us, many of them are 100% cooled, and there are some that are still working on that. And this actually needs to be updated as summer is coming to a close. You know, some additional buildings have been cooled, so we'll update for the next time we present on this as well. This is kind of what we're looking at in June.
Could I interject a question here? Do you know about some of the smaller districts around here, like Windsor, like Johnstown, Milliken, and then as going out east in Wells County and so on? Do you have any idea as to percentages of districts that are air conditioned, not air conditioned, et cetera?
So
I know
I'm
kind
not
of-
sure. That's something we can certainly reach out to them. That's
I'm
what
sorry,
they've done. Yeah.
it just now occurred to me, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but these are our larger districts in our area, and I was just wondering, like Estes, well, maybe they don't need it in Estes, but some of these others, anyway.
No, still we can dive into that. Yeah, there's a gamut throughout the state, as you mentioned, of percentage, cool, not cool, what's mitigated, but yeah, we can dive into more details on that.
And then as we look at current conditions, so we have our TSD comfort set points for the heating season as well as the cooling season. And of course, when we're cooling our buildings, that's only in cooling them in buildings that have that system in place in order to cool them. For buildings both that have cooling and that don't, we still utilize strategies to maximize those systems. So as you experience at home, opening the windows at night, that's what we do with our mechanical systems, is really purge that air, bring in that cool air, and take advantage of that free cooling. So starting those systems early and then closing them down to a certain extent. We still need airflow in our buildings when they're occupied, so we still do have to bring in that warm air through the day, but at least kind of mitigating that and bringing in that fresh air overnight, cool air. Also on the right, you can see school days and outside temperatures. So we've got 4 years of data here on those temperature ranges outside. That's not necessarily saying what's inside of the buildings. So back in 19 to 20, there were 29 days overall, if you add up all of those, that were above 76 degrees. 32 in 2021, and then 46 in 21 to 22, and then this past school year, 22 to 23. With those in the 90 plus in the last 2 years, really going a little higher. So something.
I'm going to ask them real quick. There's 2 slides we added in, so we'll update the board docs. This was support for the buildings that we're doing, and then we added a slide in for condition, like ages of mechanicals. So we'll update that in the board docs. But sure.
Yeah. So support for our buildings. We obviously recognize that not all of our buildings are cooled, and so we want to make sure that our schools, all of our schools, feel supported by our facilities and operations department. So we developed this heat guidance document last year just to provide some, strategies. So looking at, I think a lot of this was pulled from some resources in a school district in California around, there is that acclimatization. Okay.
Sorry.
We need to acclimate to the heat. So we're recognizing that as we're bringing kids in, sending them out to recess, kind of finding shady areas, maybe moving recesses to earlier parts of the day. So working with buildings, so there's a variety of different strategies, making sure we're providing a lot of hydration breaks, reminding kids, especially our younger students, that that's important. They may not think of that. So different strategies for schools, so offering that out to our building leaders, that's been sent out, we sent it out last year as well. And then also, I've offered up myself as well as facilities team to go and walk as well, because in each of our buildings there are cooled spaces, there are air conditioned spaces. In some it's just the computer lab. But how can we think about utilizing those spaces within the buildings where we have some cooler areas and can maybe rotate classes through or give a little break? So those are different things that we talk about. A few principals took me up on it last year. I haven't heard from them for many this year, but it just went out at the end of last week. And there's a flurry of activity in our building, so I anticipate walking with some building principals again this year as well, just to help brainstorm some of this.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, and I will highlight really for a second what Kristen does, because that takes a lot of time to you know, first when you send it out, everyone says, okay, yeah, great, thanks, we know we don't have air conditioning now. But when you go through the different steps and details that we can do, there's things that we can do maybe as you work through with one another that, you know, are helping some of the schools. It doesn't create the cool space, but it helps mitigate some of those hotter days especially.
And just one other point on this document as well, it does provide a resource for our building leaders as parents may have concerns. There's also some tips in there of, you know, something they may send out to parents with, hey, make sure you're sending your kid, you know, putting sunscreen on, you're making sure, reminding them for water. So other just reminders, so just additional resources so that our families and schools feel supported with air conditioning and without.
The board may also remember, community as well, last year, for the first time ever, we called a heat day. Like a snow day, except totally opposite, it was too hot, you know. But we had extraordinary pattern of very hot consecutive days where I think it was like multiple days in a row of 100 or like high 90s, which really created conditions that in consult with the operations team in my office, we came to the conclusion that we were going to not hold school. That's a very difficult decision to make, but safety overrides all decisions. And again, that was, I would say, extraordinary in terms of, you know, kind of sort of how the temperatures lined up. But we've crossed that threshold, I guess is what I'm going to say. So like we've never done that before, now we have. Poudre, I know, did that as well. If you looked at the slide, the first slide, Poudre is in a similar situation, running at about 50% of the buildings with air conditioned. So I just wanted to share that. It's I don't want to use the word support. I would say it's an option that's available to us for extreme or extraordinary heat conditions.
Additional support for our buildings. The third floor of Bill Reed, as Todd mentioned, now has mini split units in it and feels very nice. I also locked it today just to, you know, make sure everything's running, and so that's really exciting. We had identified that as one of the hottest learning areas in the district, and so that cooling in those spaces will be great.
What was the cost of that? Do you recall approximately?
Yep, so in total, it was $835,000. So it was a combination of general fund dollars as well as ESSER funds that helped to bring that project.
Yeah, the board recalls this was an option, you know, that we funded just specifically the third floor. We recognize as a priority. Just to note, a difference between this system and a typical system we put in that would last, you know, the 30, 40, 50 years, is this just pushes air in, you know, takes the air that's in the building, pushes it into those rooms. You know, we talk about ventilation change, it changes the air exchanges within the room. So that's part of the different qualities of a, you know, permanent system compared to a mini split system like this.
So as Todd also mentioned, kind of shifted a little bit of the conversation from just discussing cooling to really mechanical system upgrades overall. So we have aging mechanical infrastructure throughout our buildings. We have amazing staff who does a great job keeping that running. And so a lot of times it's, you know, replacing parts and pieces of that to keep that continuing. We have building comfort challenges in our buildings, both in the heating and the cooling seasons. And many of our air handling units that are interior to the buildings are original. So here's a picture of Trescott Elementary. And so these are original. They are massive systems and they do push the air through there. And it's also something that we need to be looking at in addition to just the cooling is those overall mechanical system upgrades.
So this is 70 years old.
And it's, you know, parts and pieces have been upgraded. It still is pushing air through our buildings. And it's important to be looking at a holistic approach for our mechanical systems as well.
And we're testing your general knowledge about all things related to this, but I seem to remember us talking about how we have some of the oldest open buildings across the state as well. So like Bill Reed and Big T are two of those. Truscott's got to be pretty close. And so we have some relatively unique situations in that we have some really old buildings and not every district has that, which might also be why they have ACs, because they have newer buildings. But just laying the groundwork for that.
Yeah, and this isn't, I mean, when you look at, we track all systems and components district-wide, longevity, and analyze the systems. You look district-wide, as we presented just with MPC and our future needs, this is just a drop in the bucket for, the bigger need when you're talking in the next 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
And then the other piece of this, so there's, the big units and things, but then there's also our control systems. So how precisely we're able to control the temperature within our buildings. So we have a pneumatic control system in a number of the buildings, which is using air, essentially, compressor, to open and shut valves, and then have been upgrading, especially with the bond, some of those systems as well to a digital control system. So continuing that so that we can have more fine-tuned control of our buildings, of those systems. So that would include some of those mechanical system overhauls, but this is really that focus on cooling of over $100 million.
When you look at that number, that's just, this is for the entire project, so it's not just, the air handling equipment and controls, it's, you're then in the ceilings, you're turning on the ceilings unit. So when you do cooling in that type of retrofit, it's a lot more intensive than just, like a Bill Reed, for example, just putting in that. It takes an extensive remodel, like on Ball this year, if you reflect, we went in, 90% of the ceilings had to be taken out because all the ductwork needed to be changed, because the ductwork, capacity was different, the return air plenums were different. So that's also, so when I say that, just to note, that's not just the cost of putting duct and putting a unit on the top of the building. It's a true retrofit and renovation of a lot of the portion of the building that needs that fit, so.
Tom, can I ask real quick? So on this list of schools, so this is about approximately 50% of our schools. Does that mean that the other 50% are fully AC?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, just another thing noted later, but these are today's dollars, and if the board reflects, with what we went through the last couple of years, this number is less. So that's just a gauge for, it's a working number to plan off of. If this takes 20 years to do, however long it takes, obviously those numbers, these numbers are reflective of today. And then, as we discussed in June, the board really challenged and asked staff is, how do we do this? This is great, you've issued us, a problem here. We know that there's an issue to work through. How do we think about tackling this? So there's a couple ways to look at it. One is, there's one option of just, if we take buildings and outfit them with full AC. So you take Loveland High, that's our priority. I'm not talking dollars now, just a philosophy of, there's a philosophy of just go do the school. You can just, that's the school we're gonna go do, we're gonna do this school, we're gonna do that school. The other area, or the other option to think about is you kind of cool it by infrastructure need. So for example, Centennial Elementary School, noted here, they're pretty close, they're prepared for like a full cooling. So we've done a lot of infrastructure already, we've done a lot of the main parts and pieces. It just needs a little more to make it full cool. So that's another thing too, we can just look at what buildings are kind of ready now to take that leap on a few of them. And the other one, which is more the Bill Reed example, is just take by the true priority and trying to find a solution for that area. So as we looked at Bill Reed, that was a priority, we found a solution to do something to help that area. So those are kind of the three different models we can think about how to attack the problem. So what I thought about doing is, I went through a little exercise and played with Excel and said, how can we do this? What does this look like? So as we think about the money, say for example, we put towards Bill Reed, $1 million for round numbers, and we just did $1 million or $2 million a year. You can see if we started that in 2024, by 2055, we're only about halfway done. I'm saying obviously then that's not, there's no economy of scale in that, that's just if you pick away it works, you get pieces of it done, but, you know, you're not gaining large pieces as you do that. And then you also do lose some economy of scale. So the orange line is the 105 million. And the red line is if we say put 2 million a year in, just, that's what we're gonna do. And it's not really talking about how, you know, where that comes from right now, but just the concept of if we did that. The other options are, say, you know, we have a needs list we've discussed, you know, that the district's facing for growth, maintenance, in front of us that we're gonna have to look at addressing the next year or so. So if there was a mechanism out there that said if we put, for example, $35 million in 2024 towards mechanical systems, and then did that every 6 to 8 years, you know, by 2038-ish, if you use those type of mechanisms to fund it, you know, you could really tackle, I'd say, most of the issue. And the other two options are some of the same. So say we just, you know, put an initial investment up front of $35 million, then we did $2 million, you know, we get done that much faster. So, you know, there's 20 different ways to really figure out how to and how we could fund it, or scenarios to fund it. You know, the bigger option, or the bigger, I think, discussion for the board is which model fits us best for how we want to work on this. You know, coming from another district that was facing this when I was there, it was more of, you know, just the smaller chunks, and it took, you know, it was on the tail end of it, it took even a decade to get through the latter part of that air conditioning system. But the school districts that have done it are taking the bigger chunks at a time. You get the economy of scale, so you can invest in, say, 4 schools at once, 5 schools at once, whatever that number is, whatever the schools is that we select. You know, you can invest in those and you get those substantially complete and you're 100% done. Then you're moving on to another section. So that's typically when you look at models of how districts are tackling this, that's what they're doing, because it's not just, it's hard to just take this you can see and just pick at it one by one, because it does expand this out for quite some time. So, you know, I thought about bringing a calculator out here. We could just play with the numbers all night and say, what if we did this and this? But really, fundamentally, it comes down to which way do we want to look at truly funding the HVAC replacement that we have in front of us. And then there's options. You know, we how could we do this depending on the different scenario the board wanted to look at? You know, what funding options are even out there? Obviously, we have general fund. You know, there's always the option the board can take dollars out of that. Sell assets. So recently, we have sold assets. You know, as far as land, water, can we take some of that, put towards this? Future bond initiatives. You know, there's that. That's one of the scenarios that was mentioned in the last slide. There's some contingency in the coming up year from the previous bond that we will be sharing with the board as far as projects and where that goes. The challenge is, you know, that as we mentioned, we have those options. The other bigger piece we have in front of us is there's competing priorities out there. You know, we have a lot of other needs within the buildings, whether in all systems, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, athletics, outside, you know, the buildings, roofing. You know, so it's, there's other things out there that we just, as we go forward with different options and how we might look at this, you know, if we say too focused on this, these other needs are going to be left behind, and that's going to also create a whole other set of problems down the road. So, this is a scenario or example of a readiness. So these 2 schools are pretty ready just to a lighter funding, I'll say, of $1,280,000, because they're pretty close to, say they're half air conditioned. I think Centennial's already halfway done. We've already put a chiller in place and pieces and univents to cool the rest of the school. We just need the additional infrastructure to make it there. So this is an option. You know, this could be until we work through a funding. This could be the next go-to. Is we have 2 schools that are close, so we can just knock these 2 schools off the list. But then when we move forward, we're still left with, you know, the 2 questions in front of us: is the implementation of the cooling that we have, the buildings that we have ready, which again is just the small chunks that takes years. or it's just the permanent cooling solutions that we can continue to look at and talk about as a need for our districts and students as we move forward. So, it was a lot of information, and we'll stop for questions there.
So I have a question totally unrelated to this piece, but knowing that we're coming into fall and kids and having just visited Peakview, and they had shaded area outside. How many of our schools have a shaded area so that if the kids are outside, they have a place to escape from the direct sunshine? All of our schools, or not many of them at all?
Not all of them.
Okay.
There's, I don't have a number, but there's a handful
A
that.
handful that do? Okay.
There's more that do, there's a handful that don't, yes.
Okay.
And we have been, Tom Head, Wall Clark, Trustfield. There's a couple others, and we've been pricing shade structures. I think it's the same thing, for a structure that'll last, you're talking $30,000-$40,000 for
Okay, I
per
didn't have
structure.
a clue, but that was crossing my mind as I was looking through all of this, having just seen the Peakview. Not that they're gonna accommodate all of the kids that are out there. It would be really hot, close together, touching. But I just was curious, thinking that, that is one thing that is not related to the air conditioning, but it is still a piece of helping the kids stay more comfortable at school.
There've been a number of recent shade structure projects with bond work as well as school funded as well.
Okay,
And more coming.
okay, thanks.
The challenge too is there's also been some put in that don't quite work.
Yeah.
Like, I can put it in for 5,000,
Great.
and so it works great for a year, but then that funding's not sustained because we can't maintain it. So to do
Yeah.
a proper structure, that's where we need to go.
Okay, yeah.
I have a question. Do I remember from an earlier safety and security presentation that, for example, schools like the elementary schools that have outside doors, they can no longer open the doors for safety and security? Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So that creates another problem. Back in the day, before we had those particular concerns, teachers in those rooms could open their doors and have ventilation coming in that way. And now, because of the tragedies that have happened and all the concern, and I'm not arguing with that, I understand that completely. So that as a mitigation factor is no longer a mitigation factor. Okay.
Right.
I thought I remembered
And Stu,
that.
I don't remember the date, but it's actually in our board policy that they shall not be propped up.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thanks.
And fans are okay in schools or not?
Yeah, we're helping
Okay.
now,
Okay,
there's
I just
different
didn't
schools.
remember what the recent email was about the things that can't be in classrooms. Had to do with odor and stuff, I believe. Yeah, okay.
So for me, it still comes down to it. There's a lot of great information here, but it still doesn't feel, for me, like it's a comprehensive enough plan presentation to really make a good decision based upon the amount of money. So that's 15 schools that were up there, 100 million. We know that some of them potentially are going to get a bond for remodeling, possibly. And then, of course, it would make sense to roll that AC ventilation work into the remodeling because it's more efficient because everything's going to be opened up. We have the issue with the master plan committee still, I think, that at some point, some of these schools, they're either really old and should be replaced and/or because of the utilization, some of the schools, we may need to change the boundaries. And then we do have money, from like the Stella Monroe, there was that, the land somewhere by Walmart.
96 acres.
Yeah, there, so there's all these different pieces that I think without having them all kind of in a comprehensive presentation, I think we're making a decision with only having like a little part of the information. I also, God damn, I had another thought and it just flew out of my head. So I just think it's important that in order for us to do this, we really kind of need to get more of this information and pull it together so we can understand for long term. Oh, I know what it was. It was the MLO, because I brought this up before, that's very structured specifically for maintenance issues for school districts so that we don't have to keep trying to play the, well, if we spend the money on this, then we don't have the money to fix this roof, or we don't, and that's what this specific MLO is for, and I really think that could help for the taxpayers to say, look, we're gonna save, but it's gonna be saved via this very specific and narrow way, so that when the roof, like at Thompson Valley, you know, those types of things, it's not gonna like all of a sudden like, oh, well now we can't put AC in this other building we were going to. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I know you guys have heard me say this before, so you're like, yeah, Nancy, I know. But I'll just keep saying it, and then eventually Todd will give me my big plan.
So here's, yeah, so Nancy, I do hear you. There's, you know, we did look at, when I talked about that MLO, you know, there's only so many structures that are going to accomplish what we need. So the MLO is more on the red line, you know, so it's not going to accomplish it for, you know, 'cause it's a couple $1 million. It's not the mass amount to be able to fund a massive system.
No, I don't mean the MLO to use for AC.
Right, but
but
just
to use-
supplanting it, yeah. And really when it comes down, when you look at truly what we have, even the assets on this list, if you were to take the sell the assets and contingency, the money we have, we have $3 million in assets available to us now. We sold some water shares of $3 million that we have. The land we sold is already spoken for, it went to Conball. And the Monroe site, we have possibly some dollars there. That's a couple of years, that's in the works, you know, selling that. So the money we have now really lends us to that just slow, steady. We don't have any mechanism, not where, you know, that's going to substantially take on something. You know, we have enough, I think, to maybe take on one or two. But we need a substantial investment to truly tackle, you know, some of this change we need. And so it's, yeah.
Okay.
I guess it's more of a philosophy of how we want to tackle it. Is we either slowly invest or we find mechanisms that are out there to make it a large investment to start taking large chunks of this way. So I think that's more the direction of how we need to, at least for staff, to, you know, move forward to, okay, are we going to take this large chunk, or are we going to just, if we want to take $1 million a year, $2 million a year, we can start doing that. It's just, that's, I think, the, you know, more of where we need to philosophically get to is here's where we're wanting to head.
And I think it's important that, well, for me, I don't want to invest money in a school that possibly isn't going to be around, because it'd be better to put in a school that is going to be around. I mean, that's my.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Alexandra, do you have any comments, questions?
No, I mean, I think basically our only option, as I see it, is to incorporate it into a bond to get a big chunk of money. I mean, if we look at, you know, $1 to $2 million a year, it will take us 100 years. You know, I mean, that's not feasible. And we don't have, as you said, the money just lying around waiting. So we need to ask and beg and plead for it, I think.
Well, this has been an ongoing problem for decades. And it's becoming more and more of a learning problem for our kids, obviously, when we see those days increasing. I mean, that was kind of stunning to look at those amount of days that we've had the over 90 and even up to 90. It's just not, it's not tenable to continue in that way. So, you know, I think Stu and Janice working maybe with the state legislature, that might be one angle. We'll, you know, we would know next year. And then I think, you know, I agree with Alexandra that we need to start considering putting this, you know, into a bond eventually, whenever you guys, I won't be on the board, but whenever you guys decide that. And master plan committee, you know, they're, I mean, what's their take on this at this point?
They see the need, they have the same numbers, they've gone
Okay.
into it a little more detail. You know, they know it's a need, you know, it's, they're sharing it's a need, you know, where they're at is, they're not the body to say this is how we're gonna fund it.
Right.
Yeah, so, no, like, they're all behind
Okay.
the educational piece.
And that's what I really, I like hearing what the master plan committee has to say, since that's community members, obviously. And that's important to get their input, and it'll be important if we do put it on a bond to have their advice on how to sell that to the public. It's not the easiest sell.
No, yeah, it's not, and that's why, you know, after we talked last time, I reflected on how we've done this and what have I seen before. And it is about systems and replacing systems and the age of our systems. The benefit we get from replacing the age of our system is cooling. You know, and that's the different models when you look at districts and how they did it is, it was just chunk after chunk. They took bite after bite to figure it out. And that's why in the master plan presentation, you know, they noted, here's our needs, and there's an AC need, but there was not a dollar amount included because it's an ongoing conversation.
It's done?
So I agree that we have to have a bigger thing. I mean, that's just, can't chip away at it. But I wonder also, when we think about the selling it to the public, is if we can get some high level numbers on what we save from the efficiency from the upgrades of the system. Obviously, it's like, it's not the whole story, but I do think that that's the flip side, right? Like, yes, it cost me $10,000 to get a new water heater, but in the end, it cost me quite a bit less when those things are installed. So if there are things like that, it'd be helpful for us to know those things, for the public to know. Because ongoing costs are also significant for energy. We have talked about that. I do think this is also part of our larger energy conversation. And so when we think about a solution for the district, it is coming down to planting trees, shade structures, others, you know, like the whole system thinking is going to help us in some ways as well. And none of those get us all the way there. So love the idea that we would think about it at the state level. Another question, and it's Pam's question, I'm just bringing it back forward, is also talking to our peers across the state about starting in August. Because if we're starting in August, and there's lots of reasons for it, but we're facing this, you know, this increase to where a decision we made 10 years ago for our start dates doesn't match reality. I think, you know, we can't do it alone. So it would have to take us having a broader support for us to figure out how we're going to do that. I know that has real challenges, but I think what we have in front of us is something that is a real challenge, period. I also wonder about Fed dollars. And so, you know, building off of your good work, Stu, I think we might need to make those same phone calls to other people to see this as that collective issue, because California is the one who wrote a version of reminding us to not let kids get heat stroke. We're not the only one facing these challenges. So maybe chipping away at it isn't just investing $1 or $2 million, it's figuring out where there are other partners, other solutions, and if all of these things come together, that also will impact it. And bake sales.
Our big sales.
It's a lot of cookies, but it's what we do to fund education.
Yeah,
So,
big borrow, steal, bake.
Amy, thoughts?
First of all, thank you. I appreciate the time that you took. I appreciate you listening to us and sort of and tweaking the presentation and giving us what we asked for. So thank you. I agree. Yeah, I mean, the bigger chunks are, yeah, I mean, if we just chip, I mean, we'll all, yeah. Thank you for putting that up there.
Yeah.
You know, I do agree, you know, we do have the opportunity for a bond coming up, and, you know, as, you know, we've talked like the Conball Peak view, it's not just AC, it is health and safety, it is, you know, looking at the whole, you know, system. So how do we, you know, combine ventilation in with that, the health and safety of staff, students, and community members. You know, there's some creative ideas. I don't know, is it feasible to bank on a bond for covering some of this? All of it? I mean, like what, if it passes, you know, I mean, because there's always that if it, what does that look like? Do we know?
We'd have to write it into the bond language. So what we do when we write bonds, it's like this bond will pay for, you know, 20 buses and
Right.
this much air conditioning. So it'd have to be very specific.
But is it feasible to ask for, I mean,
So Amy, what we would do, certainly, we want to engage the community.
Right. Mhm.
And really ask where the thresholds are, you know, what are the
Right.
priorities? We can certainly provide information, education, you know, here's the current reality. But ultimately, you know, the voters will decide. And so
Right.
part of it is engaging
That's the hard
and
part.
asking them so that whatever, if the board authorizes a bond, whatever we ask for is within the universe of what the appetite of the voters would be. And so, yeah, that's how I would answer that question. So,
Sure.
you know, is it feasible? Sure, it's
Okay.
feasible, but I mean, you know, it would just depend on, you know, what the community would.
right? And I guess I would be hopeful that, you know, the community would see this as a high need, but I don't know, we also can't bank on that.
And I would say arguably it would be rather / too ambitious to go for it all, right?
Right,
I just
okay.
think
Yes.
that there's just no, I would not recommend.
Okay.
Maybe a modest piece and maybe wrapping it into an overall safety, you know, kind of, it's about, not just about air cooling, but it's about ventilation and other efficiencies within all buildings. And, you know, voters like to see it touch as much as possible as opposed to it's just going to be this school or this region. There tends to be more amenability.
Sure.
Okay, back over to Stu. More comments?
Well, yeah. First, I think you and your department are magicians to accomplish what you do with the dollars that you have. When I talked with Senator Marchman, she did also bring up the idea of, as she's doing her work on this, of investigating the possibility of getting federal dollars. And I think that's very important, and thanks for reminding me of that when you said that. I would encourage the members of the board to contact her once in a while. Not that I think that she isn't serious about this, but to let her know just what a great need we think this is. Regarding the bond, the size of the bond, you will probably recall I'm your representative on the Master Planning Committee. And when we've talked about not too far down the road of needing to go to the voters for a bond, Todd, you can correct me on this figure, weren't we talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 million for needs of our aging facilities, and that didn't necessarily include air conditioning? Do I remember that correctly?
It was 180, and that did not include air
Okay,
conditioning.
180.
With no AC.
So if you look at the figure that he had up there, it's another 100 million.
Yeah.
We're looking at more than $250 million as an ask for a bond issue for a community. Is it feasible? To go back to what Dr. Schaefer said, it's feasible to ask. Is it feasible to make it happen? I don't know. And so I'll just end by saying, in looking at that list of schools, the one that really stood out to me was Loveland High School, not air conditioned. That school by itself, the figure said was $25 million. I don't know what to say except that. So I guess I'm done. Because I don't know what to say to that.
You know, I've looked at this and I've thought, and I even had a conversation with Dr. Schaefer a little bit about it, is, yeah, I understand the need. I feel like it's critical for the health and safety of our kids. I think that's a really high, important piece of it. But I think there's a lot of caution that goes with this as well. When you look at that list of schools, and we're talking bond, and then we have to determine at some point where that money's going to go, which schools, and how do we maintain it in a very neutral position for the community to have an appetite for this kind of discussion. So that's, I'm sort of at a loss still. And I have these questions like, okay, what do we want to do? I don't know that we can say that we have anything where we want to go with it. We have a lot of discussion to have, Bill, the bond piece as well. We're going to talk a little bit about it at the retreat tomorrow. Let's keep asking questions. Nancy, questions? Or anything more you want to ask?
You want me to ask them more?
Well, do you have another question in mind that has to do with clarifying questions or points that might help us sort out our thinking?
I just think for me, it's just, again, it's more of that. We just, but it feels sometimes like we're like this, but there's so much more around us. If we could figure out how to get it so that when we make the decision, it's like we looked at all of it. I don't know. And I know it's a big thing, but it's an even bigger thing to go to the voters and say, well, we want a $180 million bond and we want $50 million for AC. So to do that, to me, we had better have done all of these things I'm kind of talking about without looking at the big picture and all the numbers from anywhere and everywhere. Otherwise, I mean, it's going to be tough anyway, but I think it would be really tough if we didn't have that.
Anything more?
In the gym in Loveland High last week, it was close to 100 degrees
Of course.
with 170 plus band kids in there playing their instruments. It was very, very hot.
Imagine a few headaches occurred.
There were a lot of headaches.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of lightheaded kids.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah. Pam, anything more?
I think, we just always have to keep top of mind that 75% of our voters in our community don't have kids in high school, right? So it's really,
Exactly.
it is a difficult hurdle to overcome, to explain to them, oh my gosh, how would we ever expect band kids to, march in a 100-degree gym? It's almost physically impossible, right? I mean, they did it.
They do it.
But
it's not.
it's not good. So that's all my reminder of the day.
Don?
We're speechless.
Yeah, I'm with Stu. 25 million for Loveland High, and
Yeah,
yeah.
so nothing. I feel like we're still where we were in June.
Yeah.
Not feeling like we know, knowing what we want, knowing what we can.
Yeah.
I long for it to be 10 million again.
Yeah.
What was it that?
When we
Started this.
when we started our first conversation about this, it was like around 10 million.
For the district or for Loveland High?
No, for the district, it was like such a smaller number. But everything is went up.
But yeah.
It's went up significantly in a
Yes,
very
it
short
has.
amount of time.
Over
yeah.
2 years, we
Yeah,
started
it's
80
80
million.
million.
Yeah.
now.
That was 2 years ago. Before that, though, like that was also because things have gotten so much more expensive in construction.
Yeah.
Still, I long for it to be half of what it was.
Manageable.
I mean, this is based off a real case scenario. Conball is doing this right now. So One, we will study the cost difference, because we can study the utility difference, just the maintenance difference. So we have that to study, we'll get full data from. And these numbers, were pulled off of real live data that we have. So this is, unfortunately what it is. And you look at a building like, Loveland, it's over 200,000 square feet. It's, because then you have asbestos, you have different things that are playing into this. So it's not, again, it becomes more than just what you think that we're just putting it in. So.
Yeah.
But we will, the data for Ball, we'll track that, and as of next week, we'll be opening up, and we'll have those numbers compared to last year where we're at.
Yeah, okay.
really.
I wish we could give you clear direction. Track it.
No, we will, and this, I mean,
Yeah,
it's.
I know, it's.
This, and I remind everyone again, this isn't a unique conversation that, this is had in several districts across the state of how do you do this, and there's just very narrow solutions to, it's a large investment. Districts don't have large sums of money to make these type of gains, unless we want to do, the shallow, or the red line approach, which we can.
Any other thoughts from anybody?
Only thing I'll say is just a final comment. Sorry to have kind of created a feeling of doom and gloom in regard to this subject, but I am hopeful. We have an excellent team that's working on this. I'm very hopeful that this legislation could happen, and that's why I urged you to contact Senator Marchman. I think it's maybe our best hope, at least in the near future, and the fact that she was receptive and she contributed some ideas, and so.
As
yeah.
long as it's not unfunded.
Well, yeah, and she understands that. She wouldn't do that to us. Okay.
All right, thank you, you guys.
Thank you.
Anything else, Dr. Schaefer, on this topic that you want us to consider?
No, I don't, not at this time.
Okay, all right. I'm sure more will come eventually. Safety and security. Do you guys want to get up and move a minute before we start?
Yeah.
Give us 5 minutes. Get up and
All right, good evening again, Board of Education. I am still with you, but I now have another guest.
Hey, Joe. How are you?
So Joe Jansky, our Director of Safety and Security. On Strive 2025, I'm sure all facilities are welcoming, safe, and meet the needs of students, staff, and community. You'll see in the presentation tonight, we have a multitude of different strategies and trainings and pieces we put in place, built on what we have had, and put some new things in place. So tonight, the goal is to go through all those. So some highlights from lessons learned is we want to review some trainings that we've done to collaborate the system. So we've done things different than we have before. I'll share in a second. Really the goals of the training, what our purpose was behind those. As you'll see, Joe handed out is going to go over our first ever crisis response manual for TSD. So just a quick kudos that we put that together. We had a safety committee with anyway, a bunch of individuals on it that put input between admin, principals, students. So we've had a lot of input into this that really helps just guide the work that's in front of us. And then provide some data on the co-responder unit, where that is, the SRO unit, and then data. So there is some data down on the corresponding units and the growth that we've seen there. So training review, this is just a snapshot, and we spent and worked with Learning Services to create a full day around safety and security. As you can see by this snapshot, we covered everything from the discipline process to crisis response to safety updates. So what does it look like to create a crisis team within your school? What does it look like to create a parent plan? How do you work through safety details? Just everything, I shouldn't say everything, but with the gamut of a lot of our system, we reviewed with everyone at one time. And the purpose behind that was to calibrate between schools, between law enforcement in schools, and really between district admins. So there's one set level of, a uniform system moving forward. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you tell me who was at the training?
Yeah, so it was our EC12, so
Okay.
it was all EC12, so there was about 100 some.
Every
Building
building
directors.
administrator and most district administrators were.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
it was a impactful day. We spent the entire day just focusing on different pieces of the entire system. One thing that's new that I want to highlight, you'll see it's in that 10 to 12, the Navigate 360. So that's now a data system that we've implemented that tracks threat assessments. It will be tracking suicide assessments, and it has PBIS, it has emergency management in it. Anyway, it's a large system that some states throughout the country are actually mandated to use, and we brought it in here to start the implementation this year. So we're using it to track all of their assessments, and what it does is it tracks students and networks of students and really understand the bigger web of either risk or students that may need help that are out there. But the reason I share this is that everything went through and then tabletops. So we had all the SROs here, we had additional law enforcement here. I think there was 15 different law enforcement here. We had Johnstown here. There was a good representation from law enforcement to help collaborate. So we did 2 tabletops of real life issues, things. As you're reading it, we were thinking, well, that's not going to happen. But then we start reflecting, and as Joe and the other explained, it did. And so that was the purpose of that, is that each one of the teams could see how you work through the situation. They would do different share outs. So anyway, it was just a really impactful day to have just to focus on that. And with the support of learning services and the leadership, it was when we walked away, we did a survey of what do you want to do, what you like, what you not like, and it ranked really high. Everyone's very thankful for spending that time and dedicating that time to be with them. So it was very impactful. Anyway, I went over this piece here, the purpose of the goals, and then I will now turn over Joe and he'll go over the crisis response manual.
All right, so all of you have in front of you the crisis response manual that has been put together for the Thompson School District. This is a hard copy, but it's also important to know that mainly they'll be accessed electronically. So the table of contents, even if you just open to that first part there, on the electronic document, everything is linked to that part of the document. So a principal, putting yourself in the role of a principal, you've got something going on, you don't want to sit there and try to flip to whatever page you're trying to get to, you quickly log in, you click on where you need to go, and it takes you directly to it. The other purpose of it being electronic is safety and security is fluid. It constantly is going to need to be updated every year. So while this is the copy for this year, next year, hopefully when we get the opportunity to do this training again, I will ask administrators, please hand in your old copy. Here is your new copy. So just constantly making sure that we're reflecting on, unfortunately, tragedies that occur in our country, but also at a local level to working through capturing student voice, staff voice, and our community as well as parents' voice, and we'll talk about that a little bit here and a little bit of how we're going to capture that voice to continue to construct this. The big area that we highlighted within the staff that day, if all of you will turn to the incident command structure on page 7. And then it kind of continues, it starts there. But as you review those areas, what we really asked principals and leaders to do within their building is set up an incident command system, and it shouldn't just live at the district level. It needs to live at the building level as well. One of the things from my experience as a first responder is incident command is everything. It helps identify tasks, it helps keep the communication organized, because when communication fails, the incident fails. So that's one of the things that we really worked on doing. It gives a great explanation of the incident command system and even provides some charts and guidance of how the district leadership functions within that system, and then also a guide for how they need to set that up within their building. The great part of the training of this crisis response manual and how Todd and I structured the day was we would talk about it and then we would stop. And then we would give them 15, 20 minutes and we would say, build your incident command system. And then we would continue to the next topic and we would stop. And then creating that discussion and that collaboration amongst each other and feeders was really a great way to teach and help them work through it. And then also too, we kind of really sold the point by competing and finishing our tabletop exercises. So those were some areas that we really identified within the document itself, but the whole purpose of the document is to help them understand that while we have to balance response, recovery, and prevention, our emphasis needs to continue to be on prevention. The best way to respond to a crisis is to not have one. So it's to really help empower our staff and our leaders to know that there's a guide there for them. This is how we prepare for these things, so when events do occur, we can complete them as safely as possible. So I just wanted to provide that to the board. Of note, it is not a public-facing document because there are things in here that we would not want some random person in the community to have, as it may cause a dangerous situation for us. So that is that. So that is my review of that. Crisis response manual. If any of the board has questions about it later, please ask me and I'll be happy to help. We'll move into some general updates for SROs. High Plains.
I don't mean to just to
Go ahead.
for 1 second. Can you share one of the things is we asked you to create like a 1-pager or a 2-pager?
Oh, yes.
Can you explain that?
Yes, correct. Yes, thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Separate of this, one of the things that was requested by Dr. Schaefer and other members of Learning Services is a 1-pager, if you will. And so it's a quick guide for lockdown, lockout, secure the perimeter, evacuation, shelter, but also to what do you do? What are some steps if you identify someone maybe having a medical issue? What do you do if a student or a staff member is experiencing a mental health crisis? What are some immediate steps that you can do? So our hope is to support our staff to make sure that they have those immediate action steps, but also to hand out that piece of paper to our substitutes. Our substitutes often are visitors to our buildings, and they, thank you for coming in today on Tuesday, it's our lockdown drill. And they get very stressed out, so this will be a great way to empower not only our licensed staff, but really our counselors, our paras, our lunch aides, everybody in the district is a quick safety guide of some immediate steps to help support safety. That page is being reviewed at a high level by Learning Services. Once we get the approval from their lens in their world, we will get those printed and there will be one available for every staff member in the school district.
By day 1 of the school year.
Yes,
That's
by
been
day 1.
directed. It will be prior to the start of the school.
All right, so some general updates. High Plains School, Riverview School, and Peakview Academy. We have worked with our partners in law enforcement, and they will have SROs assigned to them. During this process, as directed by the board in the MOU, through all the hiring of the SROs, there was a mental health representative, a school administrator, a student, and myself. So there was those things that are outlined as a requirement. Those were all part of our interview process. Moving forward. The SRO unit will also now have 3 co-responders, 1 representative from each agency, which we'll talk more about the co-response units later on in the presentation. Additional things is the Loveland Police Department has a completely new command staff. Those of you that don't know, Loveland has a new police chief in Tim Duran. He has assigned Deputy Chief of Police Lori Scott to be the chief in charge of the SRO unit, followed by Lieutenant Chris Jacobson and Sergeant Brian Bartness. Sergeant Bartness is in the back. He is here to listen to any questions the board may have specific to police function that I may not be able to answer. He'd like to hear those so that he can provide you with an answer at a later date. Please forgive his attire. He was coming from training today. So,
Thank you.
You look fine.
Yeah, great.
Warm outside.
Yeah, it is.
For sure.
And then Larimer County Sheriff Sergeant Robert Cook is still in charge of the school resource officer and co-responder unit for the Sheriff's Office. However, due to this size, the Sheriff's Office has continued to increase their co-responders within their agency. Their agency is structured in a way that a corporal now supports Sergeant Cook. A corporal, for those that don't know, is below the sergeant, but will act as a representative supervisor when the sergeant is absent or is not available. And then Riverview School is in Johnstown. So they do not have a sergeant specifically assigned, but we do have a lieutenant. His name is Kyle Williams. And then Officer Thomas Kelly and clinician Cynthia Wolf will be part of them. What's interesting about that group is the IGA that will be proposed to the board, we will only be paying 25% of that position. The reason is because the clinician and some of Officer Kelly is funded through a grant that is through the state for co-response. So they just asked for 25% of that thing, which is great because there have been some calls out to that school and it's geographically, it's far away. So
Joe, if I can also interject. So because of Joe and Tad's leadership, we enjoy a very strong working relationship with these three agencies, extraordinarily strong. We also have formal touch points throughout the year. Actually, we have one coming up next week that includes myself and the leadership of each of these agencies. So we are calibrating and in ongoing communication with them. You can see that there's always presence here between, especially Larimer County Sheriff is here and Loveland do a great job with us, in our meetings certainly. But Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about that upcoming meeting? I think it was on Monday.
Yeah, it's an upcoming meeting. It's a high-level leadership meeting with Dr. Schaefer, myself, Todd, and then everybody from the police chief to the sheriff, and then that immediate sergeant up. And really what it is it's a very open, direct conversation of what's working and what's not working. So there are various levels of projects that we talk about, like very similar to the AC. Is what needs to be a priority now, and how can we work together to support each other. But then also too, there's a level of accountability that comes through. We frequently review data based off of criminal citations, things like that, and how are we. The best thing about all three of the agencies is they really believe and support the SRO triad, which is 2/3 coach and mentor, not enforcement. And I think that that's embodied, and I don't have the slide in front of me, but I can, approximately, I believe we're over 50% reduced in our citations over the last couple of years. So they really have taken that on and really we're moving forward in that area. All right, some other things were security staffing and increasing our physical security presence, but also our ability to respond to incidents. So we have a campus monitor 1 position. That position is really that traditional model. Student escorts, door checks, check the bathrooms, help with lunch duty, things of that nature. There will be one of those individuals at each middle school and K-8, and there are 2 or more at each high school, with a total of 14. In addition to that position, we kind of found that we needed something more. We needed a little bit more of that security presence, so we created the Campus Monitor 2 position. The Campus Monitor 2 position is modeled after districts in our region, Jefferson County, Poudre, things like that, that already have a position similar to this, but they're really focused on security. So as you can see, they're there to increase the security presence. They run our camera systems. They help with drill planning, not just the execution. They're really the right arm of the admin team within the building for the security. And then in addition to that, we have 4 of them assigned to patrol, and those patrol monitors are specifically to support our elementary schools to make sure that they have a presence as well and they have some support from the safety and security department.
So Joe, we have had a Campus Monitor 1 and Campus Monitor 2. We've had that, but you've added to those
yes.
staffs.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, correct. We've increased the Campus Monitor 2s by 3.
Okay.
This allowed for a Campus Monitor 2 to be at each one of our high schools, as well as the Campus Monitor 1s.
Okay.
So for example, Loveland High will go from 2 staff members to 5. Because of the way that we staffed it, we were able to move some monitors to different schools, things of that nature.
And one of the biggest shifts, as Joe said, is elementary, and that's been, everyone has appreciated that so much. Just, it went, last year was the first time we started actually focusing, the staff to monitor, so their daily patrol. And real quick, it was, this is a need, because the schools really had that need and they focused on it and used it quite a bit. So, as much support as we're providing at the secondary schools, the elementary too now has more support at the campus monitor level and at the SRO level too, because they're now checking in with all their elementary schools that are in that feeder. So if the police officer does show up, they're used to seeing someone.
Are they in a certain colored T-shirt? Is that what they wear?
Yes, so the
Polo or whatever.
the Campus Monitor ones, I'm an old football coach, so I created a kind of like a team store. So the Campus Monitor ones have an option of a Thompson designated T-shirt or polo. Campus Monitor 2s I'm a little bit more strict on. They wear a specifically identified polo shirt that clearly labels them as security due to their equipment that they also wear. So that way that's also easily identified by law enforcement should something happen, to make sure that those people are safe and law enforcement response as well.
Okay.
To highlight more, just to give a little example of the difference, Campus Monitor 2 goes through, we put on an in-house academy of about 60 hours. These are some of the topics that they go through and the training that we do. Some of it is in-house, and then others is done in partnership with our first responder groups around the area. So as you can see, those are kind of some of the essential functions of what they do. I've never seen elementary staff so incredibly happy for some traffic control in the mornings for student onboarding. So that way the front office staff doesn't have to run the crosswalk, and my staff can help with that. SFST? Standard Field Sobriety Test. They are not certified. That's not their goal. Their goal would be, to give you a scenario, we have a 16-year-old, we know something's not quite right. We want to make sure that they're safe to drive home, and that we're not letting them go into a vehicle if they're potentially under the influence of something. But it's not by any means a certification. It's just an identification to know that maybe something is on board and we need to get some help.
Okay.
All right, and kind of another update that we have here is our second chance. What we want to do is expand that from not only vaping devices, but to marijuana and alcohol from this point moving forward. This was done in conversation with our law enforcement partners. Previously, there was under previous leadership, there was a little conflict there, but now that we're all on the same page, it's been nice. So really what we're going to do is have a discussion with the administrator of whether we feel this is what we need to do, if this is really what's appropriate, or if the parent can handle this, if the school can deal with this, and really look forward to doing what's best for the child. The other thing that we have seen is, unfortunately, students that are receiving citations for this, at times it can be a true addiction. One of the things with our co-responder unit is many of them are, they're not the counselor that you would think of traditionally. They're a licensed clinical social worker, so their main function is to bring supports to that child and to that family, not just the child. And so what I'm asking our building leadership to do is to, after the second offense with no ticket is issued, is to complete that co-responder form to see if we can help the family and the parents with some services and some ideas versus just a citation. And that has been welcomed with open arms from our law enforcement partners. So,
Before you move off this slide, I doubt this wouldn't happen, or hopefully it wouldn't happen very often, but if the school administrator and the SRO don't agree on the solution, is it ultimately the decision of the school administrator?
Ultimately, it is. So there's only 3 areas in the world that a police officer does not have discretion. The first one is violation of a protection order. The second is domestic violence, and the third is the presence of a warrant. So ultimately, unless there was something that they were getting from their command staff that said that they were ordered or directed by their superiors, it would fall to the discretion of the school. This has happened very, very rarely, to your point. If there is any level of conflict, usually a phone call to myself and to the SRO supervisor is made, and we're able to work it out very easily. All right, elevated safety plans. One of the things that we learned, and I don't want to be too specific, but it happened in our region, we had to learn from, I should say lessons from others that have gone through these things, is if we have students that are returning to school after the appropriate vetting processes and things that have potential behavior or criminal charges that involve very dangerous activities, we have implemented an elevated safety plan. This will not be done to all students. This will not be done to 99% of students. This will be done in partnership with parents to make sure that they understand what is occurring. in a partnership with the SROs. So what would happen would be is the security staff would in essence use a metal detector wand to ensure that the student is not in possession of anything that is harmful during for their return. As you can see, the SRO and a campus monitor too must be present in that, and then many times we actually even ask the parent to be present as well during that time. What the metal detector wand does is in essence it moves into a Terry frisk, which was done at the Supreme Court in Terry versus Ohio. So in essence, what an SRO can do at that point is it creates reasonable suspicion for them. So they can look for a weapon. They cannot look for marijuana or vape or anything like that, and that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to make sure everybody's safe. So there's a protocol outlined in this crisis response manual, if you have questions about it later, that has gone through our law enforcement partners to make sure that everybody's safe, but also is supportive of case law and the rights of the child and the family.
So this isn't driven by actual conviction, or what's driven by them suddenly needing to be?
It's just looking at events that have happened both in the state and at the national level, is to make sure that if there is ever the unfortunate presence of a firearm or a dangerous weapon in our schools, that our partners in law enforcement or security are handling those items and not a school administrator or school counselor or teacher.
But it's really, I think, it's identified as specifically for a specific student. So it's not, so safe security has to go through their assessment and understand if the student goes back to school, they're put on a safety plan. Part of the safety plan, if they're re-entry into school, because of some previous exposures, whether it be to, weapons or charges, as they're re-entering school, this is part of their safety plan that the parents and the student agree to come back. That's only when this would be used. And I would say, starting the school year, we have very few, but as the school year continues, there's more students that end up doing things they shouldn't do. So instead of the expulsion route, when they go through the due process of the court system and our system to enter back in, it's just identifying those true high risk. And this was, as Joe mentioned, from a district down south that went through this, that didn't have this implemented, is how there was harm done to staff. So.
All right, and then FERPA updated. So we created a camera footage request form. So now what this, in summary, is if we use our video surveillance system for any form of discipline, whether it's lunch detention, suspension, DHS referral, law enforcement referral, anything like that, that camera footage becomes part of student record. Previously, it was not. So now we have my dispatch center. We have a filing system that we will use to retain these files, and then should a parent or any member, or law enforcement or somebody need that footage, it will be saved. Because currently, right now, our camera system only holds data for 30 days, unless you save it and then it erases itself. And so we want to make sure that we're being transparent to our community, to our parents. So if they do have a question of what happened in the school that day, our answer isn't, well, it got deleted because someone didn't save it. So now that won't be an issue. It's a quick Google form that gets filled out, and my staff takes care of the rest.
And as a reminder, this is a policy that you have enacted in June, and then we provided training just now to our administrators on how to then implement that policy.
We've already kind of talked about the one-pager. In addition to that, we created a safety video. It's about 9 minutes long, and I believe it just went out today to Human Resources to make sure it gets out into all of our leaders' hands. And we are asking our leaders to show that video to all school staff prior to them starting the school year. The video encompasses a little bit about the incident command system, a little bit about SafeToTell, and then obviously goes through all of our SRP functions like lockdown, secure, shelter, all those things of what to do, and then also too where they have resources if they have questions or concerns and where they can go. So that video is out there, and then our Public Works has been updated. That system lives underneath Human Resources. The biggest update was empowering staff that any one of them can call an SRP function, and also to kind of further pairs the lockdown with self-evacuation, as that is becoming a newer trend as well.
So Public Works is an online training module that all TSD staff, including the superintendent, need to take. It's everything on SRP, Standard Response Protocol, sexual harassment, it's compliance, so they're all required by law. And we all take them, we get assignments via email, it says you've got 30 days to complete, and you actually have to take a test, and you have to score passing scores. So it's not just like, I'm flipping through slides or you literally have to take the test, and it's not forgiving either. So you're allowed to retake it if you don't pass it. I've not gotten perfects on all of them, but
Oh, darn it.
So you got to pay attention. They take time.
A quick summary of the topics that are covered in the video.
We have access to that?
What, the video?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can share that.
We can
You
share
haven't
that.
shared?
I just
Yeah,
think
Tyler,
you are wild to know what is. Sorry.
So another area that's been updated is a big area is our increase in lockdown drills. And the reason that it's an increase is through a lot of student feedback that we captured. We needed to structure a drill that a lockdown drill is done during an unstructured time. So whether that's lunch, whether that's passing period, we need to make sure that we're helping support our students and support our staff to know what to do. So that's just not an area of fear. That's an area that we have trained to and that we're ready and we are prepared.
Board members may recall that this was in the spring, like last spring, when high school and middle school students said, we need to do these during unstructured time. So we literally took that feedback and now it's part of our program.
Good.
And then there is a agreement with the fire department to increase our fire drills to 4 a year versus just the 2 that was previous. All of our drills are documented on a drill report form at the end of each one, and then those drill report forms are given to our building leadership, our district leadership, and then obviously our leadership within our law enforcement, EMS, and fire partners to make sure that we can learn from them as well as they can learn from us. All right, the co-responders. So there are a few celebrations with the co-responders where Dr. Schaefer has asked us to be a destination district that leads the way. So the first one is the Matthews House. I know that we're partnering with them. The co-responders are actually, the Matthews House was so awesome, or excited I should say, about this unit. They're doing a video interview with our co-responder unit to message to the community of the services that we give to youth who are maybe experiencing some homelessness and things like that, to really know that we do care about them. We are working with them to increase our staff training for our TSD staff. The big ones that I want to highlight are the less than 10% of the time once a student has an interaction with a co-responder, we're not doing it again, which is good because that means that we gave them the supports that they needed and we're not just doing it over and over and over again. There are a few, right? But the majority of students and families we don't interact with more than once. And then we have more co-responder contacts than citations as a district. I'm hopeful that number will continue to go up. And then Thompson School District was featured in a National School Safety magazine, and myself and Larimer County Sheriff were invited to speak at the co-responder conference at the national level in Spokane. So, and we'll be speaking at NASRO next year. Many people are very interested in what Thompson is doing in partnership with our school resource officers. NASRO is the National Association of School Resource Officers. That is a national level conference where SROs and folks who function in my capacity go every year. There's thousands of them. And we're being asked to speak there next year.
Awesome.
Because I think that this is something that was really, that other SRO units are seeing and going, wow, we're really excited to see how this can benefit our students in our community as well.
We've also put applications out to present at CASB, and if that is accepted, I'll probably ask one or two of you to co-present with us, just because it's a school board conference, we want school board connection, as well as the AASA, which is a National Association of School Administrators, Superintendents, so we're awaiting status on that, so we're putting forward an application to present on that as well. Part of it is absolutely promoting the great things we're doing. And it's also, I think it's incumbent on us to share our successes and learnings as well with just the field. I feel very strongly that we get stronger in public education by sharing success, and so that's really the impetus behind
So Dr. Schaefer, have we thought about asking Mike Hausman to contact the area newspapers to do a story about the co-responder program being featured in this magazine?
So we certainly can, yeah. I mean, I know we have had state coverage already from, for this date. But yes, we certainly can promote that as well. Yep.
Yeah, I think the local newspapers would be interested in
I
that,
would agree.
because there's a lot of interest in school safety.
I see Todd and Joe taking notes on that.
Yeah, I did see that. I did see
You're gonna have to
that.
ask them.
As you can see, these are the school types by contact. So as I know the lettering is a little gray, but 32% is elementary, 39%, almost 40 is middle school, and then our high school is down to 27.7%. What we found interesting, because this was a pilot in the first year, was that elementary was bigger than high school. We found that was a little interesting. We're not really sure on the why yet, because we have 1 year, but it's something that we're going to watch and we want to track. So we'll continue to move forward from there. What's also too here is who's generating the calls. As you can see, over a quarter of them are actually from our SROs. So that just shows that how bought in law enforcement is. That over 25% of these referrals are coming from our school resource officers. 15% comes from my staff. And then the school social workers, school counselors are smaller there. The area that I do want to highlight is that East or Teal, TSD dispatch area. That is done by various levels of school staff where they need the co-responder and they call our dispatch center, and then we dispatch the co-responder from there. This year moving forward, we are going to ask for more data and ask them their role when they call dispatch so we can identify that area as well. And then the contact type, as you can see, almost 60% of the time they are at school, 11% of the time it's at their home, 7.3% is in the community, and then 23.2% is by phone. The by phone is usually in a collaboration with TSD staff who's going through something, and or a follow-up call to make sure the family is doing well after we've responded to the call.
So like contact with parents.
A lot of contact with parents. And then these are our call types. As you can see, our biggest ones are follow-up, kind of like we just discussed, welfare checks, consult, and then unfortunately 20% is suicidal ideation. What that means is these are times where maybe our TSD staff has identified something going on, and they have called the co-responder unit to come in and to help them through that process, as our school counselors are not certified. They can't put holds on people should they need them. What I will say is our hold numbers are very low. They're usually able to safety plan with the parent and the student goes home with their families, which is important. All right. And then does the board have any questions? That is Deputy Solano, who is the deputy side of that. He will be very angry when he sees that I did.
Great.
So,
That's why we have such great relationships with them.
Exactly.
Pictures like this.
But I will say that shows the relationship with our schools is they
Yeah.
are, the why behind what they do, they wholeheartedly are in tune with. And, they're in the schools doing this stuff because they care so much. So he probably won't like it, but it also to me shows, that's what they do, and that's where their heart is. And, yeah.
that
And it
photo-
probably happens every day.
Oh, yeah.
It's real.
I'm gonna save Joe's for later.
Yeah, that particular photo, I took it, and it was after our co-responder, who at the time was bilingual, read stories at Truscott. So that's just what they do when they're not responding to calls, if they find a way to immerse themselves in the school culture and to be a safe place for students and staff.
Let's start over with Amy and just go this way around for questions if you have any. And you don't have to have questions.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the comprehensive, the robust, the awesome, amazing, I don't know what other words, and that you all listened to what from student staff, some unfortunate things that have happened. This is amazing. then I put my parent hat on of little kids. And, you know, when I was in school, we had like earthquake drills and, you know, and it makes me sad that we have to have this, and it's what we have to have. I am very grateful that my children are taken care, are safe. You know, I feel that. So from a board member, thank you, and from a parent though, thank you.
Dawn?
Oh, we're going this way?
Yeah, we are going this way.
I'll ask a question, because there's a lot of, like, I'm overwhelmed with all the compliments. So on the contact type slide, I have a question about that part. So is it adds up to 100 because it's a pie chart, of course it does, but is that we do make contact with 100% of the kids? Because we don't at the sheriff's office co-responders, right? And so, you know, like, we had, I was pretty sure that was the answer, so thank you. So when you call 911 and you need a co-responder, if you don't answer the door, they leave. They might try to call you again. If you don't answer, they don't try again. And they are actually as dedicated as what we see. But they still just don't have the follow through that we do. And I just want to point that out in addition to all of the other amazing things that are part of this. We've really raised the bar in a lot of ways, and it's not just what's happening in schools, it's what's happening in homes. We are really supporting those kids, and I'm just so amazed by that less than 10%, because you and I were just at a thing this afternoon, and I was sharing the success of co-responders was having that follow through, and I had no idea that they were as successful as that. So I'll leave it there, but wow.
Thank you.
Pam?
As always, this is very eye-opening, and it's, you know, this society has changed so rapidly in our last few years. It's kind of hard for me to, you know, in my mind, my last kid graduated in 2015, and none of this, I mean, zero of this was in place. And so you guys have just been so proactive and just jumped on it in the most positive way possible. Congrats on being, you know, nationally recognized. I just think that says volumes about our staff and our admin. I do have one quick question. If there's a child who is extremely fearful of lockdown drills, is there a way for staff to kind of warn the parents that, how does that work, I guess? Because I know that you don't want to announce the lockdown drills.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we do is we do have that parent contact about, saying, hey, we're going to do this. Usually what I see, especially at that younger age group, is a lot of elementary schools try to structure it as a safety week, especially for our kindergartners and first graders, parents who maybe never done this before. So it's giving them the opportunity, some warning to know that. Then the other thing that during this conversation that we had, this training on the 20th that we empowered our staff to do is, especially with students with special needs or kindergartners, you don't need to wait until it's a giant school event to practice a lockdown. You can do it in a much smaller setting. You can do it classroom by classroom. You can do it group by group if you need to make that smaller, to make it a little easier, but then we're still teaching them. And so then as we get bigger, then we'll do the unstructured time. We're obviously not going to, we're going to make sure that those unstructured times or ways that we can amp up a drill are very, very sensitive at the elementary level, and that we obviously would never ask an elementary child to do the same things I would ask a 17-year-old to do. So we'll be very sensitive to that in partnership with our elementary educators to make sure, and our parents to make sure that that's right. And if a parent chooses to pull their student for that time, then that's okay, and that's their right, and I'll do what I can to support them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great. I look forward to reading my manual. I think it's impressive, and I think I would echo what these people said, a very comprehensive and a good response to local and more wide-ranging events, I think is great. I do have a question about the Navigate 360. If you could just talk a little bit more about like who uses that and how exactly that's utilized.
So for this initial year, it'll be principals, assistant principals, counselors, and deans would have it, as well as my staff. What this is in essence, it's the Infinite Campus of Safety and Security. So we can upload threat assessments, threat screens, safety plans, criminal charges, everything that you need to know. But what's very cool about the system is that it's actually very similar to social media, in the way that when you have a student that's obviously, and it's very, very confidential in the way that it's done, but if I was doing an assessment on student A and they're exhibiting A through C behaviors, I can tag it. Well, now if there's another kiddo within the same school that we're seeing those same behaviors, maybe it's a classroom size and now it's gonna flag us. And we're gonna know, we seem to be seeing more bullying at school A. We need to identify this and make sure that we're not losing that information in a student-specific event versus maybe what's going on at a bigger level. And then also too, if we have students that transfer schools, go to different school districts, things like that, the information is all right there.
Okay. So basically, it's like a repository of student information and behavior things
Yes.
and things.
So, like Todd alluded to, it can do a wide variety of things. PBIS, suicide risk assessments, it even has emergency management suite that can do reunification. But it's such a large system that Dr. Schaefer asked us to speak with other districts that have implemented this. And the biggest thing that they said was go slow. It's so big, it's so massive, go slow, focus on one or two things that you want to get done this year, and then next year move into the next level, and then just continue to move that forward because of the size of the system.
So right now, is it blank?
It is 100% kind of blank. My staff is currently working. We had to wait for the Infinite Campus system to update because it talks to Infinite Campus. So all these students who have safety plans or things that we need to pay attention to are being uploaded by my staff and shared with the appropriate administrator now, but we had to wait until August 1st when the Infinite Campus transition was completed.
And I'll say part of the thought process to get this going was off feedback from leadership. We would have these cases going on, and we started brainstorming how can we, there's got to be something there besides Google Doc or a phone conversation, something to make it more integrated, especially when you're talking school-to-school safety. And this is one of the things that really came to top. And then when you look at different states around the country, they actually mandate a system like this, like they do IC. This is, and I'm sure Colorado will get here, but it's just it's mandated in other states, and this is what you have to do on this side of it.
I do want to point out a community partner. This is actually a cost savings for the school district. Thompson Valley EMS has taken over. By state law, you have to have a doctor oversight for an AED program. They have offered to take that over for us free of charge. So then we were able to take those funds and use it for this system. So just want to make sure I publicly acknowledge them and their time and their willingness to support the schools.
Nancy, anything?
Like Alexandra, I love this manual. I love how you spent so much time with the staff trying to really just drill down into what was apparently kind of percolating underneath, but no one was really aware. And it looks like you've just done an amazing job in addressing a lot of that. I don't know if it's a question or a concern. I understand the need to collect data on students through this NAV 360. My concern is just we seem to really be building a lot of data repositories around students, and so that's just something I get in this day and age. We have to try to figure out how we can connect the dots, but at the same time, it just gives me pause that we're collecting so much data, not just in this, but like in some of the other softwares that we have. And again, just going back to like even the metal detector, just making sure that when we're, especially since it sounds like the parents will be involved, I'm sure that there is really something going on, but I just try to make sure that we don't accidentally, I don't know, somehow not connect them right or misread the tea leaves, and now some student's life is maybe changed for something that wasn't necessarily accurate. It's just a concern. I love everything that you do. I mean, I think you're a great asset to this district, but this is just something that for me personally gives me concern.
I'm just grateful that you had this all put together to start the year and go forward so that we don't have to deal with what we did last year. So, thank you.
I wonder if there's a need to have a page identifying acronyms, not identifying, defining acronyms. My eye just landed on something, I can't remember now, I can't find it now, it was ICSS or something like that, but I didn't see it defined on that page. So I wonder if it would be useful to have like a legend or a page of abbreviations, etc., and their definitions, maybe arranged in alphabetical order, so that somebody's using this and comes across one of those that they're not familiar with, they have a place to go.
I will make sure that that is on the electronic copy immediately. Thank you.
Is there anything about this that needs to be connected to our policy
That's about it.
that we have to go back through or do anything with?
The reflection that I will need from the board, this is a staff response. This
Okay.
is purely for TSD.
Thank you.
One of the things that Todd and I are working, one of our next projects, last time we reviewed our emergency operations plan, besides the infectious disease annex, was about 5 years ago. So one of my project over this year will be done to review our emergency operations plan. That is a bigger document than this, and that is where now we get to know and dictate a little bit about what police do, what fire does, what emergency management does, what EMS does, and then that document is actually signed off on by the Board of Education in addition to the sheriff of Larimer County, the police chiefs. So that is where I will need some board input and reflection.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just want to thank you for reminding me. This was like a year. I feel like we looked at it last August. Is that right? Am I remembering that right? And I was looking at it today, like fresh eyes, and I'm like, wow, this is really easy to use. And I think the last time we looked at it when we were in a group together, I was like, I still feel overwhelmed by it, right? I mean, it was a lot. And so I think it's great. And the electronic version being clickable is even more intuitive. I do appreciate that it's hard copy because we talked about how important it is for the go bags and everything else. Another thing that struck me as I flipped through this is how incredibly sensitive you are to students with disabilities, but there's also like other identifiers. So I know it came up a lot, but just really being thoughtful of where there are classrooms that don't always go through the drills in the same way. And I'm glad that you're talking about how to do those differently in ILCs and things like that too. This book represents people being thoughtful when they're not in a crisis and having a plan that they can give to a stranger to follow. And I feel like that could happen with this, which is awesome. And there's a ridiculous amount of work that went into making it that way. So thank you for that. And I loved seeing the tabletop too, right? That's like law enforcement. And so I'm grateful that we did it that way because we need it. As you said, it felt like, well, we're not going to have this. And a lot of those things in the appendix we do in fact have. Or we have something that requires us to act the same way even if it's not what we capture here. So the fact that we're getting people to think about that and build those neural connections to crisis management is pretty awesome. So
Thank you.
awesome work.
The board may recall that in the spring, our commitment to the board and to the community was a creation of a community group. Todd, can you provide an update, Todd or Joe, provide an update on where we are with that, because that's ready to imminently launch.
Yeah, so we're gonna send out the application now that everyone's back and engaged. In the next, by the school start, that week of school start, we'll do a couple weeks of, application gathering. Then similar to the MPC, with applications and just make sure that all are appropriate, and then invite those citizens, teachers, whoever may be in. We are putting together a kind of a bylaws for the committee to make sure that everyone understands what the purpose is. So that'll be part of the application, to understand, this is what it's about, this is what it's for, this is your purpose in the committee, just so the expectations are all set. So long story short, that works pretty well done-ish. We'll be sending that out in the next few weeks. The goal is then to have the first meeting mid-September to kick off that community meeting. So, and I would assume we want a board.
Yes, I would recommend that we have a board representative that we can certainly talk about tomorrow at the retreat. Yes, I think that would be very appropriate.
Is there student voice in that?
Yes, we're going to issue it to the
Student, staff, and
Yes.
community.
Thank you.
I do have another question now that I'm going through the table of contents. The tabletop exercises, will those actually be used in building for something? You did them as part of the training? Okay. Do they have other uses beyond the training with staff?
Yeah, so these, when we write these tabletops, there are some that are written as things that would need to be done in partnership with our first responders. But really what this is they can of course use the ones that are already in there. The ones that the staff members trained on are actually separate of those.
Okay.
They were a reflection of incidents that actually occurred in our district. And what we need to do is, it was not an effort to pinpoint a school that did something incorrectly. It was done to just learn. We're all on the same team. We're a Thompson team, and it was to learn and move on from those things. So the way that I explained it to the administrators is, here's an opportunity for you. Here's how I structured it. If you'd like me to come in and facilitate it, modify the scenario in some way, we can, kind of like Don spoke about, it's about building those neural connections and those thought processes amongst our buildings and our district to make sure that we're prepared the best way that we can be.
I'll also share that I've asked Todd to conduct tabletop exercises with cabinet as well. So we did that during the retreat because we have opportunities, I think, also at the senior leadership level to make sure that we are calibrated from communications to the various departments. We oversee a lot of people, and we want to make sure that we're also aligned in our thinking.
All right, anybody else? Thank you for spending your evening with us.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
All day.
All right, we are drawing a close to our meeting. There's future topic items for board consideration, but that falls into what we're going to work with tomorrow. And gathered that we're okay with norm check-ins for now. So I'm going to adjourn our meeting.